Hello, brilliant minds, and welcome to another episode of Research Methodology with Dr. Pree. Today, we are going to be talking about another important aspect of your research study. Take, for example, that you have gone through the last few episodes, your supervisor is happy with your topic, very impressed with your title, but all of a sudden, they start asking, what exactly are you asking in your research study? And all of a sudden, you freeze. Okay, what they are actually asking you in essence is, what is your research question? All right. And this is a very important aspect of your study because all of the chapters of your research study flow from your research question. Your title, remember that your title flows from your topic, which is a broad area of interest, actually mentions the destination of where your research study is going. But a research question is actually giving you a defensible study. And that's why it's very important to make sure that your research question is there and straight to the point and is something that, your supervisor will be impressed with. Okay? One of the things that you have to have at the back of your mind before we get into the how do we go about putting together your research question is that apart from your title, apart from your topic, this is also one of the first areas that your supervisor is going to take into consideration. All right. A sharp question signals a very sharp researcher. All right. Before your supervisor reads anything else, when it comes to your research study. And as I've stated before, your entire design of your study will actually flow from your research question. It will determine whether you are going to do a qualitative study or a quantitative study, if you're going to use surveys, if you're going to use interviews, especially because of the verbs that you're going to include within your research question. So if your research question includes explore, the chances that your methodology is going to include interviews is very high. If there is another verb entirely, that will also determine what other type of tool or methodological tool you're going to use within your study. So as usual, within Research Methodology with Dr. Pree, on this channel, we always try and use a simple everyday analogy to explain all of the concepts that we talk about on this channel. Today, I want you to imagine that your research study is a mystery case. All right. So somebody has died, somebody has been murdered, you have been brought to the crime scene, and you are the detective that they have hired to answer or to find out who has killed person A. All right. Usually when it comes to a detective's case, their whole case is built on a mystery. So in your case, your whole study is built around the mystery of who killed person A. That in essence is your research question. Your research question is one fundamental anchor, which pulls everything together within your research study. Everything within your research study is going to try and answer and solve that one mystery of who killed person A. So let's take that as our layer 1. Now, after that, we then have layer 2, where, you have the question, you have the body there, and the mystery is who has killed person A. But it doesn't stop there. There are leads that follow from that layer 1. Okay, so by leads, you have noticed that there's fingerprints on the weapon. So who do those fingerprints belong to? Where was the suspect's spouse at 9 p.m. last night? Oh, there's a weapon around. Who does it belong to? Where are this person's phone records? Where is their phone? Did they have a conversation with somebody the night before and maybe the altercation, turned really wrong? Or were they walking down the street sometime last week and they were talking to someone and that person threatened them? What actually led to this case? What actually led to this person being killed? Those are your leads. And in this case, we can take that as your sub-questions. So that means that sub-questions are your main question broken down into individual questions which are meant to answer your main question. So that's our layer 2. Now let's go to our layer 3. After you have ask the main question, you now have sub questions. Then what is important is the doables or the actions that follow those leads. So like I had mentioned earlier, you have noticed that there are fingerprints on the weapon. What are you supposed to do? Lift those fingerprints and take them to the lab for analysis. You have seen that there is blood. Okay, is it the blood of the victim, or could it be the blood of the suspect? You take samples, send them to a lab for analysis. All right, you try and track down the weapon, who it belongs to, and so on and so forth. These are actionable things that come from your leads. And in this case, you can say that these are your research objectives. Now, when it comes to objectives, we're going to talk about that in another episode alone, but I just wanted to lay that foundation for you. So your first layer is your main question, your main research question, which in this case is going to be your mystery that you want to solve. Your layer 2 is going to be your sub questions, which are the leads within you, this crazy murder case. And number 3 are the durables that you're going to do for to answer or to get more evidence around your leads, which in this case are going to be your objectives. So now, when it comes to putting together your research question, there are 4 fundamental aspects or 4 parts that your research question should have. And I'm very sure that you'll find these parts very familiar, because I think we talked around these lines when it came to putting together your research title. And these are, number 1, your population, number 2, variables, and number 3, your relationship or your focus, and number 4, your context. So you have to make sure that your research question tries to touch on each of these 4 parts or areas. Let's look at them in more detail. Population. When we're talking about population, we're talking about who or what, okay, you are studying. You cannot just say your research question is on students, all right? The more specific you are, the better. Same thing with your research title. I said before that you have to make sure that your research title is not too broad. It's the same thing with your research question. It can't be too broad. You have got to make sure that you define things as much as possible. When you're talking about students, are you talking about high school students? Are you talking about tertiary students? Are you talking about adult students? Who exactly are you talking about? The more specific you are, the better for you. Number 2 are your variables. These are the changeables within your study. Okay, so what exactly are you measuring within your study? All right, what is that thing that changes, or perhaps maybe the experience that you are studying? That has to be highlighted within your research question. Number 3 is your relationship or your focus. All right, so how exactly are the variables within your research question connected? Are you looking at comparison? Are you looking at relationship? Are you looking at a lived experience? All right, this has to be a very clearly stated ask. Okay, and then number 4 is your context. Where, when, all right? Now, this is extremely important because this will actually set the boundary line for your research study. As I have mentioned time and time again, especially as a postgraduate student, or even as somebody who is, doing a research project, you only have a certain timeline or time frame, where your research study is supposed to be conducted. You don't have forever to do this research study unless you're doing a longitudinal study. Okay, so you are a postgraduate student, you have a limited amount of time, and you have a limited budget as well, if a budget is involved in your study. Your context is going to highlight the scope of your study so that you can stay within that scope and not go overboard. So you always have to make sure that your context is very clear. And by context, this could be a timeline or a time frame, a range, of ages. It could be a certain geographical area. It could be a certain institution. All right. So you always have to make sure that this is clearly defined. One of the common mistakes that I see when it comes to research questions is that a student will come up with honestly a very good and interesting question. Let me not say good. All right, a very broad and interesting question. But you have got to make sure that your broad and interesting question is actually answerable. One of the things that I want to highlight with research questions is that you as the researcher have to answer the question. Do not confuse this with the questions that you're going to ask various individuals. Let's say, for example, you're doing a survey or you're doing an interview, all right? Whatever questions that you're going to ask your individuals are supposed to help you to answer the research question, right? That means that whatever that you do within your research study has got to be something that is answerable. You cannot have a research question that is too broad where your study cannot in reality actually answer. All right, let me give you an example. How does social media affect the mental health of young people? Is that an interesting research question? Yes. But is it actually answerable and doable? Probably not. Why? Because what exactly do you mean by social media? What type of mental health are you referring to? Who do you mean when you're talking about young people? All right. All of these things can mean different things to different people. So by social media, are you talking about Instagram? Are you talking about Facebook? Are you talking about a certain type of social media which is within a certain geographical area? There are certain social media apps which are specific to certain regions. Which actual social media are you referring to? All right. By mental health, are you talking about, somebody who is going psychologically mad, psychiatric mad? Are you talking about anxiety? What exactly are you referring to, when you're talking about mental health? All right. And then young people, that is such a generic word. Young people can mean a lot of things to different people. To somebody who is within their 60s, a young person could mean somebody who's in their 30s, or somebody who's in their 50s, or somebody who's in their 40s. For me, for example, a young person could mean somebody who's within their 20s. To a 20-year-old, a young person could mean somebody who is in their teen years, and so on and so forth. So what exactly do you mean? All right. And also a very important question, another layer which you can add onto this research question is, what time frame are you looking at? Are you looking at pre-COVID? Are you looking at post-COVID? Are you looking at the 1990s? Are you looking at the 1980s? Are you looking at this year? Are you looking at a certain range? What actually are you looking at? As I had said previously, the more specific your research question is, the better. So if we were to reframe this research question, how would it sound like in a way that would actually work? All right. How does daily Instagram use relate to self-reported anxiety among female undergraduate students aged 18 to 24 at a Namibian university? All right. This is still very interesting, but you can see that it is very specific now. All right. And it is actually a question where you can design an actual study from because of its specificity. All right. I want to bust 2 myths before we go on with this video, which are, number one, my research question needs to be really long so that I sound as if I'm very important and I sound as if I'm very academic. No, not necessarily. The more short, sweet, and straight to the point your research question is, the better for you. Generally speaking, your research question should just be one line, all right? Ends with a question mark. This is different from a research problem. With a research problem, now you're talking about a paragraph, but your research question has just got to be a question, full stop. In this case, question mark. All right? The second myth is that your first draft question is actually going to be your final question. And honestly speaking, this doesn't really happen all the time. It's actually more rare than it is familiar. As time goes on, as a researcher, remember that you are growing as you're going along the way. Don't feel pressured to feel that my first research question has got to be the final one. You'll actually find that the more that you read, the more that you're going to refine your research question. And I'd really like to advise that you go through this exercise with your supervisor, because they can actually be able to tweak your research question as you go. A very good tool could be, for example, using Google Sheets, where, you have a live document, or you'll have a live Excel document, so that, your supervisor can see what you're on, what you're doing, and they can actually help you in real time. So never feel put under pressure that you have got to get it right the first time. Even if you go back to your research question and you refine it 4, 3, 5 times, it's okay. It actually shows that you are growing as a researcher and you're becoming sharper as you go along. All right, so now let's look at some more examples, okay? If we were to take a vague topic and then work it up to an actual question, let's see how we can go about doing that. So let's start with a general topic, not title, all right? So let's just say that you are interested in remote work and productivity. It's very broad. It's not specific. How then can we turn that into a research question? All right. Let's walk through the 4 variables that I had given you earlier. I hope you have written them down, but if you haven't, please check out the description box and I'll also highlight them there. Your population. Which population are you talking about when you're speaking about remote work and productivity? Perhaps in this case, you're talking about mid-level employees in a Namibian financial services firm. All right. So now we have defined our population. Number 2, what are our variables? All right. Our variables are that we are measuring remote work frequency. All right. We're also trying to look at self-reported productivity. And then number 3, what is our relationship? Our relationship, or our focus, is that we're looking at how these variables are related to, okay, in quotes. And then our context is that we're looking at firms with hybrid policies, all right, over the past 12 months. Now let's try and put all of those elements together as a research question. Now your research question is going to read, how does the frequency of remote work relate to self-reported productivity among mid-level employees in Namibian financial services firms with hybrid policies? All right. If you want to make this more specific, you can look at just one particular financial services firm. All right. Now, you can see that that is more of a quantitative study, but now you can also look at a qualitative version, of the same formula. Let's say that you want to understand what it's like to be a first generation postgraduate student. This time, okay, you're looking at, the lived experiences of a postgraduate student. Okay. So what would your population be? All right. First generation postgraduate students. That's going to be your population. Number 2, your variable or your focus would be lived experience of navigating academic and family expectations. All right. So that those could, for example, be your variables. Number 3, what is your relationship verb? All right. Your relationship verb in this place is that you want to explore. Okay, so you want to make sure that that word is present within your research question. And then perhaps your context is that you're looking at, these students within a specific faculty, or you're looking at these students within a certain academic year. So now let's try and put all of those elements together in a research question. What would that look like? Your working question would now be, what is the lived experience of first generation postgraduate students navigating academic and family expectations in the Faculty of Education this year, or in the year 2026, or between the years 2024 and 2026? Now, when it comes to your research question, one of the questions that a lot of people might ask is, should I just have one main question and then many sub questions, or can I have 2 main questions? The answer to this question is that it would be best to have one main question and then you have sub questions that come from that main question. The danger with having more than one main question is that you'll actually find that you're trying to do 2 studies in one. And you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. The dynamics of this might change or might be different if, let's say, you're doing a mixed method, study. And we can look at that in another episode. But most studies will actually rely on just one central question, which typically, is the norm, rather than having several main research questions and, you're trying to run two studies, at the same time. All right. Now, what then does this mean for the amount of sub-questions that you have? If you have a main research question and then you have about 3 to 4, highest 5 sub-questions, that is okay. But if you now have more than 5, 6 sub-questions, then you actually might find that you're becoming more granular, you're becoming less relevant. And also you will actually find that somehow you're trying to put in certain variables that were not within your main question, but you're trying to put that within your sub-question. So always just make sure that your sub-questions try and answer the main question and are not trying to bring in another aspect or another study and trying to slip it in within a sub-question. All right, now let's look at one of the examples that we had discussed before, and now let's see how we can break down that main question into sub-questions. All right. So the previous example that I had given was, how does the frequency of remote work relate to self-reported productivity among mid-level employees in Namibian financial services firms with hybrid policies? How can we extract leads from this mystery? Or how can we extract sub-questions from this main question? All right. So let's break it down into leads, or let's break down the question, all right, into 3 sub-questions. What is the current frequency of remote work among these employees? Your second sub-question could be, how do employees self-report their productivity? And number 3, what is the relationship between remote work frequency and self-reported productivity? What you will see is that with sub-questions, you're actually able to answer them independently. But all of those independent questions are meant to be there to answer the main question. So nothing is then left out. And also, very important, like I mentioned before, is that there is nothing extra that is added on. If you find yourself doing that, or if you're tempted to add in another layer into your sub-questions, then it would be better to add that layer into your main research question. That's number 1. Or number 2, try and make sure that you are not actually bringing in another study into your main study. So make sure that you do those 2 checks. All right. Is this sub-question that you want to add in another element to your main question, or are you trying to slip in another study in a very dubious way? Always make sure that you check those 2 things, all right? What are the sweet spots when it comes to sub-questions? Each sub-question will later become one objective. And like I said, we're going to do another episode on that on its own later. All right. Now, the nugget that I want to leave for you on today's episode is, when you are doing your research question, I want you to do what is called a FINER check. All right. So FINER stands for FINER. Okay. So F, feasible. Is your study feasible with this research question? Can you actually collect this data with the time frame that you have, with your budget, as well as with your access? If you cannot answer these 3, then you have got to go and recheck your questions. All right. Number 2, interesting. All right. Is your research study only interesting to you? Is it only interesting to your family during a Christmas dinner? All right. Is it only interesting to you and your supervisor? All right. It has got to be something that is interesting to you, your supervisor, and to the research community at large. It cannot be something that is only interesting to you and your family. All right. N stands for novel. Is your research question novel? Does it add something new to the conversation, even if it is a small gap. And we're going to do another episode on your research gap. Even if it's something very small, can it add something new? Can it look at a new angle within your research question, within your research study, that has not been answered before? E is ethical. All right. Are there any serious risks or concerns or coercion that is associated with your research question? So when it now comes to the methodology part that you have to do so as to answer this main question, are there any ethical risks that are associated with that? All right. Are there any access problems that you're going to come across, which you cannot resolve when it comes to this aspect, of your research question? If there are issues when it comes to risk, coercion, ethical clearance or ethics in general, make sure that you go back and recheck your research question. Then R, is your research question relevant? Does it connect to a real gap? Does it, contribute to a debate, within the research community? Is it a need within your field? Remember that your research is supposed to solve a problem eventually, somehow. It's supposed to contribute to knowledge. It's supposed to ask questions. It's supposed to contribute somewhere, somehow. All right. And the last thing that I also want to make sure that you do is that you have one main question and not 3 questions stacked as one. So always make sure that your main question is actually one question and not various questions or various studies that are put together in one question with the word "and" all over the place. I hope you got that. So thank you for watching today's episode. See you in the next one.